Okay guys, Joe here with SimVRlabs, and we're going to continue on with our Lua scripting series. What I've done is I've basically rewritten this XLUA script that we did in the last tutorial in FlyWithLua, right? And so you can see this is, I'll call this XLUA. You can see there's some differences. So the first thing you can notice at the beginning is you declare the datarefs up here just like you did over here. Pretty much the same thing. There's a name, there's a call to find dataref or to call the dataref, right? So in XLUA it was this with an equals find dataref, and then you had the name of the dataref. Here it's sort of the same thing. It's dataref, and then in quotes you put the name, what you want to call it, the variable name, and then here you put the dataref, and then you have to put whether it's writable or read-only, right? So if you just want to read from it in your script, you put read-only. If you want it to be writable, that means if you want to actually be able to change it, you would write writable there. Most of the time you're going to be dealing with writable. However, if you have just a ton of datarefs and a big old script thing going on, and you're not going to write to any of them, it's a good thing just to read some of them. It saves just the tiniest fraction of processing power, and all the fractions add up. So you do it just like that, and then you notice we got the function flight start, and we did the whole deal here. I went ahead and left it function flight start, and I basically have the same code for both of these. Now, first of all, this isn't going to work yet. We have some issues, and I'm going to tell you why here in a second. First of all, function flight start is the name of our function right now, but it doesn't have the power that this one did in XLUA. In XLUA, this is what's called a predefined variable, which means it's got some extra C++ code in it that means, hey, only do this once on the flight start. I called it flight start just to keep it the same over here in FlyWithLua, but there is no do this on flight start in FlyWithLua that I know of. So there's another way to set this up to where it does it only once, right? So we'll get into that, and the function after physics. Like I said, this is not your runtime code function like it is over here where it does it every frame. This is just a function. This is a bucket, right? It's a bucket, and I went ahead and kept the name after physics, but it's not going to do anything unless it's called, right? Unless you call it to do something. This is how you throw your functions into action, right? There's do every frame, which is the same thing as function after physics. This is basically your do every frame section in XLUA. This is how you do every frame in FlyWithLua. You want to define each function how often you want to do it, right? There's do every frame. There's do often, do sometimes, and those have different values associated with them as far as when you want them to do something. So you can look at the FlyWithLua manual and it'll tell you what to do, but I could say do often flight start, and instead of doing it every frame, it would do it every second. If I said do sometimes this after physics function, I think it does it every 10 seconds. So we're going to leave these as runtime functions, do every frame, and that's how it's going to go. Now, if you know anything about FlyWithLua, you know that you usually drop your script, your Lua script, into FlyWithLua scripts folder, right? When you do that, it becomes a system-wide script, right? Now, if I drop this into the FlyWithLua scripts folder, this FWL stands for FlyWithLua door init.lua. If I drop that into the FlyWithLua scripts folder, it's going to do this. It's going to run this thing for every single aircraft that you load up, right? So what I like to do, there's more than one way to skin a cat here, but what I like to do is I drop this into my aircraft folder. That's the aircraft that I'm going to that this needs to apply to, right? So I drop FlyWithLua door init.lua into the aircraft folder. So it's right now, if you look right up here, it's in X-Plane 11 aircraft, Laminar Research, Cessna 172, FlyWithLua, door init, Lua. Now I have to make what I call a launcher Lua script that I put into the scripts that basically says, look for the Cessna 172. If the aircraft that you're in is the Cessna 172, then load this file. So I call it a launcher script, right? So you have to create a little launcher script. It's real easy. So I'm going to go new, and we're going to drop this into our FlyWithLua scripts folder. And so you basically say, so the way you differentiate it is the ICAO code, right? So if, and I think for FlyWithLua it's plain, and it's all caps, plain ICAO equals C172, right? And I think that's all in parentheses. Then, so we'll get into what then is in a second. So if plain ICAO, now how do I know to do that? Well, that's a predefined variable, just like these are powerful variables that have some coding behind it. This is too. So basically this is telling X-Plane, look at the plain ICAO of your current aircraft that you're in. If it equals the ICAO of your aircraft, then load up that other file. Now, how do we know what the ICAO of any aircraft is? Well, there's a couple ways. First of all, there's a dataref for it. So if you searched in Sim Innovations and you search for ICAO, you'll see there's a dataref. Now I could go into dataref tool and I could just look up sim aircraft and I could see what it's returning, see what it's giving me, and it'll be giving you the ICAO of the aircraft, and it would say C172. Alternatively, you can go into PlaneMaker. You can load up your aircraft into PlaneMaker and just hit a standard author, and it's right here, ICAO code for ATC. There you go. So that's probably the easiest way to do it. Just go into PlaneMaker, standard author, and then look for the ICAO code. So that's how you find it. We'll get out of that. So if plain ICAO equals C172, then do file. Okay, do file is a powerful little thing. See how it's green? Green means it's like a powerful little dude. So basically that means open up the file and run it, right? Now what file do we want to open? Well, there's a, I think it's aircraft path. I think it's aircraft path, right? We'll check this in a second. So aircraft path, let's just go ahead and check it. I have another one. X-Plane 11, resources, plugins, FlyWithLua, scripts, my 412 launcher. Yeah, aircraft path, right? Okay, there it is. So yeah, I did it right. So aircraft path, and then you do 2 dots. You do a space with 2 dots. That's called concatenate. All right, that's a $10 word for. It just means continue on with a string. All these things run together. So what I could do is I could say aircraft path. What is your aircraft path? Well, aircraft path is this part. So if you see up here where my mouse is, all this stuff behind Cessna 172 SP. So this Laminar Research aircraft X-Plane 11 in my D drive, right? All that is the aircraft path. It automatically fills that in. Now, aircraft path is going to be different for everybody and everybody's different machine. That's why it goes ahead and like finds whatever that is specific to your machine and then puts it in there. That's how aircraft path works. These are powerful things. XLUA does not have this ability. So if I wanted to do a do file and load up a certain file for a certain aircraft in XLUA, I don't think you'd be able to do it, because I could do it from my machine personally by filling it all in specifically, the drive and all the folders and the directory name. but everybody's going to be different, so it wouldn't work. So you have to have, that's why FlyWithLua and SASL is so much more powerful. There's other reasons, we'll keep getting into them. So do file from the aircraft path. Now I could go slash concatenate, and then anytime you're doing a string is a run of letters and numbers, right? That just means read the words in the context. So then you just put in the name of the file. It's going to be door init.lua, right? So that's that, and then you can, so if it's that, then you do that and then end, right? So I could do this would work just fine, right? But you see over here I have the words directory separator. I did that for the 412. What's the difference? The difference is that this works fine for Windows only, right? It does not work fine if the user is on a Mac. This won't work. If the user is on Linux, I don't know. Actually, I think Linux may work. Regardless, if you want to make it cross-platform, rather than having a different one of these with different symbols right here, they coded up another super powerful thing, and it's the words directory separator, right? All caps. So I'm going to get rid of this slash, and I'm going to call it directory separator. Make sure that's right, and then end, right? And now I want to save this as, I'll go ahead and call it FWL door init launcher, right? That one goes into your resources, plugins, FlyWithLua scripts folder, right? It's a launcher. Save. So that's that. And now when you load up X-Plane and you get in the 172, I've cleared off the XLUA, by the way. That other Lua file is not in there, so when we load up X-Plane, they're not going to conflict with each other. So let's go ahead and get to it and find out what all we still have to do in our code and where we're getting any kind of errors, right? So I'm going to go in here, and when you're in FlyWithLua, for most things you don't have to actually restart the aircraft to make things change, to reset your scripting, right? If you make a change, then to see your change pretty quickly, you just go into plugins, FlyWithLua, and reload all Lua scripts, right? Now, when I reloaded that Lua script, it gave me an error. First of all, it says Lua stopped up here, right? And it says right here, aircraft laminar research, Lua 23, EOF expected near end. EOF stands for end of function. So Lua 23, EOF expected near end. Now that looks familiar, right? We saw that earlier when we used to push play on this thing and look at the deal. That just means I have an end where I don't need an end, right? So I've got the if end there, I've got the function end there. What's this end doing here? So I can get rid of that. I can hit save, go back up here, FlyWithLua, reload, and there we go. Now, what just happened? Well, first of all, my I was looking down. Okay. Second of all, so I was looking down, and I can't actually look to the left or right. Right? I'm trying, but it keeps wanting to put me in that spot. Now, if I try to go forward, it just doesn't. And I try to go left and right with my arrow keys, nothing's happening. Well, why? Well, because remember, this flight start isn't actually the flight start. It's just named that because we had it named that the other time. So this is running all the time. So if startup running equals 0, which is what's happening, I'm cold and dark, door is open equals 1, and set these pilot head positions to that, and then never let it go, right? Because it's always, every frame, it's going to keep resetting these values. So, like, that's why I can't look anywhere. It's always jumping me back to 40. So, we have to do what, there's several names for it. I call them flags, right? So you have to set up flags. So basically, I want this to happen one time, and I have a flag on the outside of my bucket, and that flag is down, right? And once it happens, the flag goes up, and once that flag's up, then I want Xplane to not even look at this again. Like I want it to look and see every frame. I wanted to check and see if the flag's up. If the flag's up, I wanted to skip it, right? So that's basically the logic behind it. So we have to create a flag, right? And you don't put flags inside the bucket. So if you're thinking of this as buckets and flags, the flag goes just outside the bucket, just next to it, right? So I'm gonna create a flag, and I'll call it on start. I don't like that. Let's just call it start flag, right? And we're gonna make that equal 0, right? So start flag equals 0. Now I'm gonna put another if up here, right? So if start flag equals 0, then if startup running equals 0, then do this. Okay, this is what's called a nested if. I've just nested this if inside of this one, so it's not even going to get to this little section until this little section is true, right? So if start flag equals 0, then do all this if stuff. Once that's done, then I can say, I can make sure this end is ending that little section, and then I can make sure this end is ending that little section. Now, start flag is 0. So if start flag is 0, do this. But start flag is still 0. So the next frame, if start flag is 0, do this. But start flag is still 0. Does that make sense? So we have to make the start flag 1 somewhere in this little logic, right? So I usually, you can put it, I could put it here, right? I could put it here, so I could say start flag equals 1, right? So if start flag equals 0, then if this happens, do all this once, and then set your start flag up here to 1, which means pop your flag up next to your bucket, and then every time Xplane sees that bucket, it's just going to skip over it because the bucket's got a flag up, right? So we could do that. I usually put it just outside. It doesn't matter. I usually put it just outside that section, just because it's easier for me to read. So there we go. Now we got our function has an end, this if has an end, and this if has an end, right? And so all that looks good, and that's the way it should be. Okay, so I'm going to save that, and I'm going to come in here, plugins, reload Lua scripts. Now you'll notice I can move around, I can go forward, I can go back, and now just to check it and make sure it's doing its thing, I'm going to switch aircraft real quick. Then I'm going to jump back in. Cold and dark, boom, perfect, right? Now, it loaded kind of like this, right? So why didn't it load like this? So let's check this out here. Dataref tool, SimGraphics. View. We're looking for PSI. We're looking for that one, right? Let's reload it. Yep, it set it. So one thing to note is that we've got a conflict going on, okay? And for whatever reason, the conflict is not rearing its ugly head, but it usually does. And I'll tell you exactly what it is. So normally, that PSI wouldn't work right now for me. Now, there's a reason. It's because with FlyWithLua, you have usually multiple scripts that are going on inside FlyWithLua. So chances are, you've got all kinds of little scripts you're running OVR, or you're running VMI-Tweak, or FlyAGI Tweak, or something's going on in there, and those are all calling datarefs, right? Those are all calling datarefs at the top of their deal. Well, so are you. Well, if you guys are calling the same thing, chances are you have a different name here. Well, that in and of itself usually causes a conflict. So when that happens, the best thing to do is for you and the author of the other script to get together and make sure you guys are using the same name. The second thing that could happen, and that could be causing a conflict, so I use Sparker's log pilot head position thing. I use this in SimVRlabs to help me easily set my teleport hotspots, right? Well, he's got it too, and he's got it named this, pilot head PSI, with caps and no underscores. I've got it named pilot underscore head underscore PSI. Now, if I come in here and I go reload all scripts, and I'm going to pause it, and I come over here to the dev console, you can see it gives me information. This is one thing I love about FlyWithLua, is under the dev console, not only does it spit out information up here at the top if something's wrong, but under the dev console it usually gives you a bunch of debug information. If you look here, it says the dataref simgraphics pilot head PSI is already handled in variable pilot head PSI. You want to use it with pilot underscore head PSI, right? As long as only one variable wants writable access to the dataref, it is okay, but you lose performance, all right? So the easiest thing to do is to make sure you're naming it the same thing. So rather than getting on the horn with Sparker, which his name is Bill, he's a great dude, rather than getting on the horn with him, I'm just going to rename it what he's got, right? Because it makes no difference to me. So I come up here and I'm just going to copy and paste that there, and I'll paste this here. And that's going to get rid of that error. Now, if I come in here and I go FlyWithLua reload, now you don't see that anymore, right? You see this one from the old start, and then this is the new start, start loading script files, and then you don't see the error anymore. So if I unpause it, you'll start seeing this filling up with other things. That's why I pause it when I want to read what happened at the individual load, the initial load rather. So the other thing that could be a conflict is he's got his as read only. I've got mine as writable, right? That's a problem. And here's the deal, is that I was having a conflict before I made this video, and I changed his to writable, and it fixed it, obviously, right? Because if you're calling it as writable, he's calling it as read-only. FlyWithLua is going to have a problem with it. It's never going to let me write to it if it sees his read-only first. So it's all about which one it's using and which one's taking precedence. Basically, now that mine's writable, his is going to be okay because he's not trying to write to it. But his was read only, and his was taking precedence earlier. Why it's not now, I don't know. But I couldn't write to it because it was seeing it as read only because it was calling his first. So we have to make sure that we're on the same page. So what I would do is now I would call up Bill and say, hey man, I need writable access to that data ref, but I don't want to get rid of your script because I love your script. Can you just make that writable in yours? And he would say, yeah. And I would be like, do you mind if I change mine? And he would say, no, go ahead. And then I'd be like, this is a script I want to share out with people. They'll be using it as a plugin for their aircraft. And he'll be like, all right, cool, I'll make it writable for the next update. And he'll release an update, and everybody will be jiving. So I'm just going to change his to writable. And I'm going to save his, and now there'll never be a conflict, right? So it should always work. So there you go. That's basically the FlyWithLua version. And then I taught you about some nested ifs, and I taught you about the flag to make things happen only once. And you could use this flag method. Is pretty powerful. You could use it for different things. The next one is going to be SASL is the next scripting language that I want to go over, although we may stay in FlyWithLua for a while, because the next thing I want to show you is some different conditionals. There's more things than just if. There's some whiles. So like while something is happening, do something else until that something that's happening is not happening anymore, and then break out of that thing that you were doing. There's that. There's also some timer stuff. So I want to like show you how to like manipulate some things. Like, so for example, I think the next one, what we're gonna do is we're gonna make it harder to start if it's cold. Right? It's just going to take longer for it to actually fire. You're going to be able to turn it over, but it's not going to fire right away if it's cold outside. So we're going to throw some temperature data refs in there. We're going to throw some magneto failures. So like if the magneto failure is on, then your ignition will turn, but it won't actually fire until you take that failure off. Well, I can put that failure behind a timer, and so like if your oil temperature, we'll put that data ref in there, if the oil temperature is less than 30 Fahrenheit, if the oil temperature is freezing, then it takes like 3 seconds of turning it over before it actually fires. So after 3 seconds, I'll take that magneto failure away, and then it'll fire. Right? And so to the user, it just seems like it's taking longer to actually fire up. So we'll do goofy things like that, and just we'll keep going with some more things. I hope you guys are enjoying this, and we'll talk soon. Thanks.